Let's talk herd. Hi, Denise. Hi, Dilara. Thank you for joining me today. It's wonderful. I'm sure we're going to have an amazing discussion. So earlier, I wasn't really that sure how we would start and what we would talk about. So when I'm like that, I always just go and ask the horses, or I go like within range of the horses and see what comes to me. And I don't know if it's from them or just like being more grounded. But what came to me, it was almost a question. What came into my mind was, this was the context was that I was thinking about healing, and because you're both, I don't know if you would call yourselves healers, but you are doing like a healing modality, like a therapy. So I was just thinking about the subject of healing, and what came into my mind was, if we were to heal our perception of the world, would that heal everything? Like, is that enough? Is that all we need? And so later I was thinking more about that, like, what does that really mean? Like, if we see the perfection in things, does that create perfection? And so, yeah, so does that make sense, that question, to you?
Is your question, if we healed our perspective of the world in general, then would everything be healed based off that shift that we make?
Yeah, is that what healing is?
Denise, you want to run with this one first?
Why not? Actually, I think our perspective of the world shifts with our perspective of ourselves, of our own, of who we are. And then, then we can see the world without judgment. Once we heal our own traumas, and I think both of you, in your websites, I can see, both of you address that and look at the whole person and the connection with the horse. But I think it's akin to it's akin to riding. Shift your seat in your stance so that you're in an equilibrium, so that you can see the world in an non-judgmental eye and just see it as it is.
Yeah.
Does that shift what happens around us? I think it does. I think people respond to our energy and will relax or tense up to kind of match that vibration or that energy.
Yeah. And do you think it goes deeper, like it's actually like therapeutic? Like when you don't see the problem, putting it kind of crudely, then you're actually helping it to find its way out of itself. Like maybe it doesn't even exist unless it's in our eyes or our awareness. But then in the kind of healing that I do, I would say part of it is the acknowledgement of what's there. But then how do you know that it's just because of you that you're seeing it and acknowledging it? So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't think it was a question that came I think it was definitely from their perspective, because it's sort of like the way they see the world. To them, they don't have that same concept of healing as we do.
I think.
What do you think, Dilara?
I think that the question kind of brings up lots of other micro questions within it. Like, if we were to shift our perspective, would the situation, let's just take one situation in general that requires healing or is being healed in a way. Would our shift in perspective of that thing heal it? I think that I love Denise's answer in terms of the riding analogy as well. I think it's like the more that we work on our own self, the more we shift our perspective of who we are, and that in turn shifts our external reality, because it is like a reflection of who we are within. And when it comes to the question of if we shift our perspective, would that heal everything or the world? I think that the healing journey is meant to bring with it lesson after lesson after lesson after integration point after integration point after perspective shift. It's like this continual wave. And I feel that for me, there isn't really, I'm not looking for an end point as much as looking to learn about what the healing is presenting in the situation. So then that would shift my perspective anyway. Does that make sense? And then at the same time, I also feel like in the horse's question, there's like this invitation just to shift our perspective as like a simple point, and that they're saying like, can you shift your perspective of healing in general, and what that is, and how you experience that internally, like Denise said, like within our own selves and our own trauma or layers or whatever it is that's being presented, which then ultimately reflects out externally anyway. But I feel like the question in itself is really, really simple. Like, can you shift your perspective of healing without necessarily knowing what that perspective is going to be? That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that word shift, because the word that came to me was heal. Funnily enough, can you heal your perspective? So I suppose, that's what that is in my mind. So, because I'm interpreting for them, so that I suppose for me, healing it would be that it became like untethered to issues, like it becomes dissolved. So there's nothing to heal. Yeah, it kind of reminded me, and I don't know if this is really, but it reminded me of what you read about Jesus Christ and the way that he healed people, like, just sort of seeing their light, and so they just became that, and there was no more. So it's quite interesting. So where would you say, both of you, that you are on on that scale of healing? Like, where are you with the concept of healing right now in your lives? Do you feel like you move more away from that or more into that, or how do you think about it? Because it's kind of essentially what you do if you're going to have an identity around it.
Dilara, would you like to lead this one? Because I'm learning as you speak. So many ideas come to mind. So,
likewise, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you. So, where am I on my healing journey, or with healing as you said, like so rightly, as maybe an identity or something that is like this, almost like a partner concept that I just seem to have really close to me all the time. I go in and out of waves of feeling like healing is my whole reason for being here, and my whole relationship with my horses in terms of the reciprocity in our relationship. Like, they, through their being and their existing and their presence, they provide, just in this very organic way, so much opportunity for healing for myself. And then at the same time, of course, I do my best to show up as a healer for them, or to listen to them. Really, it starts with the listening. If I can get into a space where I can listen to what they need, then I can do my best to provide that, whether that is healing them or whether that is just being in, again, like we're both providing for each other, and that ends up rolling into a place of healing trauma or wounds, whether it's physical. For them, it's mostly like old physical compensatory patterns, or, you know, wounds that they've had physically that then need to be unwound. And for me, it's a lot of emotional stuff. So there's a real like partnership in that with us. In terms of identifying as a healer, part of me definitely does identify as a healer, yeah. And so I would say I'm more in a moving more towards a soul journey with this, in terms of figuring out what is potentially ego for me and what is like, what's my true relationship with healing energy as a being, you know, as just like a conduit. And so I say more on the egotistical side. Yes, sometimes I do identify as a healer, and then I go into another wave of just completely dropping that and just feeling this very open energy of no label, and just doing my best to be as present as I can be every day for love. That's really my thing. So when you were talking about Jesus and him being able to hold space for that light within another, you know, when I go into meditation with the herd, they seem to just be able to simplify everything and strip it back to, you know, how are you showing up in love today?
Yeah.
And whether that is healing or not, I don't really know, actually. But
that's what I want to ask you. That would you say that there's a different approach with your own horses and with other horses that you see in like difficult situations? Because I would say for me, like, and my herd, it almost feels like more of a, if there's any healing going on, it's like in the direction of them to me these days. And the work that we do is more energy work as a whole, like as a unit. But then if I went into a situation like with other horses or beings where there was like an imbalance, then that would be, you know, that healing concept would, or not concept, but approach would be engaged with again. So do you feel there's a difference there?
You know, I do. I think there's a difference, but because it really, to me, it feels reciprocal. I don't have a herd of horses right now. But anytime I'm around horses, there is a sense of, like you said, Dilara, of being present. And you almost take on their perspective. And when you consider just the anatomy, you know, they have this, they can see things in a much broader perspective than we can. You know, they can't see directly behind them, but because of where their eyes are positioned, you know, we can only see, our field of vision is limited compared to theirs. They just have this way of knowing how, what's best for the herd. And I think I don't know. I think I'd like to be more like a horse in the way of being able to be that present, being able to stand and take in my surroundings, to notice my environment, to be connected with every individual in the area and every species. They have to, because they're prey animals. And I don't know, I think I would like to be more like a horse.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as a healer. I see myself as a healing facilitator.
Yeah.
And that when I work with a horse or a person, I don't do the healing. I just, like you said, I just recognize what is it that's out of kilter. And I think the only time I'm really like a horse is when I'm actually either teaching a class, when I'm living my truth, when I'm teaching a class or doing hands-on work with someone, because that's when I'm most present. That's when I'm most myself, and things just flow.
Yeah.
Light just flows through yourself, through each individual. I don't know. There's a magical feeling to that.
I love that you brought up that. What would you call that? That kind of empathic way that horses have for. We kind of have issues with that, but as humans, but like that of the good of the herd, that all the members are kind of concerned or aware, or everything they do is for the good of all, like the one. And yes, I think that is something that's it's almost like a kind of doorway that we can maybe go in, like you said. But yeah, I wonder how that affects our ability to really help them or to create that healing space, because we're fundamentally not really like that, are we? We're quite individually orientated. Yeah. What would you say about that?
Well, I have a mini story that I would love to share from the herd that happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Denise, I love what you said about being a healing facilitator. When you're in that space, like, it's almost not you. And I resonate with that so much, in terms of when I'm actually treating horses. That's exactly how I feel. I feel so humble, like it's not me, and at the same time I get to just bear witness to the whole process. So yesterday morning when I was with the herd, I really felt this invitation to do some cranial work with one of the geldings. And so I began working on his body just really, really slowly and gently, because often my horses are very selective as to when I'm actually invited to treat them, because they do so much of their own energy work. And it's more about me recognizing what needs to be said and what's present in the moment, rather than just going into craniosacral mode type of thing. So there's a real invitation that happens, and I have to be really aware of that. So the invitation was there, and I began working on him. And Florenzo, who's the other gelding in the herd, he came over, and I needed to get around Toby, who's the other horse I was treating. I needed to get around to his other side. And so I said to Florenzo telepathically, I was like moving around, and Florenzo was standing right next to him. And he just really slowly moved away, and then let me in, and then moved back. And he put his muzzle on my left arm, which was the arm closest to him. I had my hands on Toby's ribs. And I could feel the collective healing within the herd. And the heat coming off him was just like, I mean, it wasn't even heat, but it felt like heat, And then I could feel like the threads of all 5 of them and me. And of course I was there like as a complete conduit, but at the same time, my mind was going like, I was in so much appreciation because of this awareness, like you said, that they have of each other and how they bring us into that. Because then to answer your question, how does that affect us in terms of the way that we relate to each other or to them? I feel that it helps us to come out of this barrier state that so many humans develop over time or from childhood or, whatever it is. There's this, I can't connect because of X, Y, Z. And over time with horses, and it doesn't really have to be over time, actually, it could be in one instant. You hear of so many amazing stories that happen with people coming in and being completely changed from 5 minutes of being with a horse. But their general collective heart-centered, like pumping energy that they just give off and emit all the time, it helps us to break down those barriers, because to connect with them, we need to open from here and like slow this down. So slow our mind down and open from the heart. And if you do that enough, there's like, I feel like our nervous system gets to understand what safety is in a different way. And we get to feel into the like collective nervous system that a herd can create that's regulated. Plus, like Denise said, there's this general, like overarching empathy that they just naturally have, because they need to be able to look out for each other and they need to be able to be safe. And safety is community, safety is togetherness, and safety is connection. And if we can just be observant of that, let alone be in the energy of it, then it gives us it. We're able to map it and to take it into our minds, and then gradually and slowly, if we're ready to kind of break down that armor, because ultimately connection is also why we're here, and to really thrive and to feel safe and to survive, we actually do need each other. And it's just that there's like it's become inverted in our, definitely in our Western cultures. Absolutely. And so that's,
Yeah, so I really want to ask you, do you think that people are like that because of the way they bring up their children, like their babies? Because we're like one of the few species, I mean, I know, well, can't really compare, but the way that we don't, some tribal people do that, and they have the baby there from the start, and they're always, they've just got that bond the way a mare and a foal do. And somehow our society's just lost that, especially when hospitals, people started to go into hospitals, and there is I don't know if you've heard of the continuum theory. I think it's called theory, but it's about bringing up children like babies in that way. So they're always with you. They sleep with you, and they're in like something, you carry them and you keep them. And babies who have that upbringing are so much more they're so much more advanced, and they grow bigger, and they're more intelligent, and all of these things. And presumably they're more emotionally connected and engaged. So would you think that's an element of it, or it's also just that we've got an ego and we've got the intellectual mind, and yeah, what would you say about that?
Well, first of all, Dilara, oh my gosh, what you said about that herd mentality and watching out for each other and safety being so important, and the way you tie this in, Camille, to our upbringing, it really is important. It's, I think I can see a difference in it is so important in the way that we grow, because when we don't feel safe, it's true, we can't connect with those around us. And in that vulnerability is where we heal. And so it's just kind of this interesting, it's an interesting experience, because in my own healing journey, I just moved back I've been in Racine, Wisconsin, where I was born, for the last year and a half. And I didn't live here. So when I was moving back, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't really know anybody there. I'm not very connected with that part of my family. I didn't really grow up with them. What is this going to be like? What's it going to feel like? Am I going to still be the black sheep of the family? But I did it anyway. I thought, okay, well, it feels right. So let me just go with it. An interesting thing happened. I'm starting to learn connection, but I learned more connection of who I am back in a place before there was a lot of trauma in my life.
Okay.
And during that first year and a half is when there was a herd of people helping to raise me, caring for me. And by returning to this space before the trauma, with the people who were here with me, helping me to feel safe, I did find a way to heal.
Wow.
I guess it was a little bit similar to a way a herd is, except I was kind of out in my own pasture most of the time. But people knew, well, let's invite her in. Just as you mentioned, Dilara, it was important for me to feel welcomed into a space, and vice versa. Important for me to open up and welcome them into my space. And somehow it worked. And I found, I think you know what I mean. You're nodding your heads. I think you've felt that as well when you reconnect with a piece of yourself. It's almost like it's almost like a physical shamanic journey, returning to a place where I was complete and whole. And now that I've recaptured that, it's time to venture out and live my truth.
It's like rooting back in. Yeah, that's amazing. And it's complete, in a way, it's on that subconscious vibrational level. It's not something that you could ever really achieve other than being there with them in that way. But you said something that was really interesting, that we heal when we're in that vulnerable place. And yet that's scary for us, because I love that, discovering that vulnerability, or how to be in that place because it's so, like Dilara, in the way of craniosacral therapy, it's so how would I put it? It's just so kind of alive and engaged. It's like you're really connecting with that, just that flow, or that it's hard to find words for it. But then I want to tell you about something interesting that happened that I don't really understand yet. But I was just doing, it felt like a kind of new thing that I was feeling into with the horses. And it was kind of it was being vulnerable, absolutely vulnerable, but also like yielding and flowing with that a bit. So I was just sort of touching them, not in a sort of way not in a kind of light sensitive way that would have, but just kind of a really tuned in, almost like a sort of massaging thing, but just kind of really feeling them and really feeling that vulnerability with them. And strange thing happened in that the two horses that I was doing that with, when I was doing it, it felt like they went into this incredibly profound place with me, and we were together in this. But then it was like this other thing built up in them. And both of them, one of them, it's not out of character, but the other one, it really was. Both of them did suddenly turned around and attacked the nearest horse. and just kind of out of the blue, completely. And I was like, what is, it just felt really odd because the power of it was so strong. And I kind of thought it was because they were too vulnerable for the herd. Like it wasn't actually a natural state for them to be in, because they have to have a certain, that was just the only thing that really came to me to understand it. So yeah, I don't, because we tend to be in that, we talk about horses and that everything's more elevated or more advanced than us, but I don't know if that's entirely the case. I think they are also working with their own evolution, and the fact that they're, that they are quite, there still are some sort of certain things that are a bit more rigid. So I don't know. I don't know what you think about that and how that relates to being vulnerable, if it brings anything up.
I mean, I can see what you're saying, and I think I've seen. I think both. I think we all might agree that is the case. That we're all. That's the beauty of it. We're on even ground, and being on even ground, you're communicating. We are communicating with one another in a way that that is, again, on even ground. One is not higher than the other as far as people, not with people, and not with horses versus people, or as a healing facilitator and a recipient. I see us as, we're on even ground. It's mutually beneficial. Yeah. And I think you're right. When another layer is taken down, I think we do need that space sometimes to just settle into how we feel. And it might feel threatening when someone else is close by, or even, Dilara, when one of your horses moved to the side to let you in. I think once they realized, oh wait, she's going in to help. I don't need to protect that side of my friend, of this other horse. She's going in to help and release. And I think once that realization occurred, things opened up. But I agree. Once that vulnerability, once we release another layer, we do feel more vulnerable, and sometimes we need that space.
Yeah, I love that way of putting it. Yeah, another layer. And because I tend to, I feel like I get reminded all the time that we're all evolving, we're all changing, we're all growing. So it's not like things change all the time. So maybe for them, being that vulnerable with a human being was like a big deal, and it had to be processed. So, because I feel like we are like, I mean, I could say, oh, well, we are like that. Oh, but like you say, there's layers and layers and layers in it. Yeah, it just keeps changing, and it's fascinating. But I haven't felt to do that again. It's almost felt like it was something that we did, and and it changed who we are, and now we're in a different place. So yeah, I think it's how you judge it. Like, you can't judge it. I wouldn't judge it as being bad, but it definitely was like going to a place that we maybe hadn't been before. Yeah.
Sounds powerful.
Yeah, it felt really it felt like this energy and it's almost like it didn't know where to go. So they just like went like that, and the others like what do we do with this energy? Yeah. It's quite it's quite an amazing journey, really.
I recognize that feeling when it's true, when something opens up. You're just like, oh my, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.